I named central figures in the trans movement who have never been called out by Peter Tatchell. Peter Tatchell, who wrote a letter supporting sex between children and adults in the Guardian.
Will you come to the bower or the free boundless ocean where stupendous waves roll in thunder and motion, where the mermaids are seen and the wild tempest gathers to love there in the green, the dear land of our fathers? Will you come? Will you come to the bower?
QR code. Welcome back to Uncensored with me, Rosanna Lockwood, sitting in for Piers. He's still on holiday, getting a well-earned break. Now, Father Ted co-creator Graham Linehan is considering legal action now against a venue in Edinburgh unless it apologises and U-turns over cancelling a comedy show he was set to appear in. The Leith Archers pulled the plug on the Comedy Unleashed event after it received complaints that Mr Linehan was on the bill. The Leith Archers, this was, their decision had not been influenced by online activists and that the comedian's views just didn't align with their overall values. The Dublin-born writer has been an outspoken critic of transgender self-identification. Leith Archers, this venue in Edinburgh, is a vocal supporter of the LGBTQ+ community. So where is the line being drawn here on freedom of speech? When does it become hate speech, or is it just comedy, where free reign is the name of the game? Well, Graham Linehan joins me now live from Edinburgh to talk a little bit more about this. Graham, thanks for making the time. Here in the studio, I'm joined by human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell and socialist and author Grace Blakely. We'll get to their views shortly, but first, let's dive into this with Graham. I've got to ask you, Graham, did you expect this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't have enough time to expect it. I didn't realise my photograph was going to be put on the poster or the announcement, and then it was. And within 2 hours, the event had been cancelled, so I didn't really have time to expect anything.
I'm going to ask you quite frankly, is it a strategy, do you think, not necessarily by you, but by the comedy group, to get more attention for this comedy show? Because if it is, it's been very successful. You've announced that there's going to be another venue for this, one more fitting. You've directed people to the ticket sales. You've had a lot of publicity over the last 24 hours talking about this. Was this all strategized? Well,
we'd already sold out. So, why would we try and sell more tickets when we sold out? The venue, I don't think we've moved into a bigger venue, maybe slightly bigger, but, we just took what we could get. I'm not sure whether you've thought that question through completely. It doesn't really make sense.
Well, I'm thinking it through like this, Graham. It's a very LGBTQ friendly venue. It's very publicly that way. Your name was kind of kept back until the last minute. It was gonna be offensive to that community, to that venue. That must have been known by the group that put this together.
What about my views would be offensive? Can you give me an example?
I am hesitant to platform some of the language you've used, but I've seen some of the tweets you've written in the past about people. You're
hesitant to platform some of the language I've used.
Yeah, because I don't like it. I find it quite distasteful. You've compared.
Can you give me an example?
You've compared people in the trans community to, quote, nonces. You often liken people within the trans community to paedophiles.
No, what I said was there are central figures within the trans community. Amy Challoner is one example, who is now married to a paedophile. His father is serving 24 years in prison for torturing and sexually abusing a little girl. Amy Challoner was at the heart of Stonewall when Stonewall was introducing self-ID in institutions across the country. So he's just one example. The inventor of the trans flag has written so-called erotic stories about young girls.
Graham.
He said that
Graham, I mean, do you understand the difference here between, because this has turned into an argument about whether comedians can be risque and controversial and dark in their humour, which of course they can be. People are brilliant at it. I think you're a comic genius. Your work with, Father Ted, the It Crowd, Black Books, exceptional. Some of my favourite comedy. Of course, I understand dark and controversial views make comedy. But is there a difference, though, between airing outright offensive political views on Twitter and the artfulness of bringing dark opinion into comedy?
Yeah, but none of my comedy is about this issue. It's just observational comedy.
But do you not understand why your Twitter output and why your commentary over the last few years has led you down this path to being constantly cancelled?
Because you're protecting paedophiles. The media is protecting paedophiles, like Amy Challoner, who was at the heart of Stonewall when Stonewall was introducing self-ID around the country. Once again, Amy Challoner's father abused and tortured a little girl in the attic of his home. Amy Challoner's boyfriend is an admitted paedophile who writes short stories about abusing children. Now listen.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Every time we bring up these central figures, we are accused of calling every figure who is trans a paedophile. We're not. We're talking about those people who the media and trans rights activists never call out.
There are plenty of people in the media, Graham, who are calling out extremist factions within the trans community. The people you've just mentioned, by the way, are named. They're not here. They are not here to defend themselves.
Name one person.
There are plenty.
Name one person who is calling out the trans rights activists who put pornographic images underneath J.K. Rowling's tweets.
Graham,
name one trans rights activist who condemned that act.
Well, look, can I just ask you this actually before we go? Do you regret having taken this path? Because you seem to have taken a more and more extreme path over the last few years.
How is it extreme?
The views you've just expressed, most people would call those extreme. When you started,
you think it's extreme to be an anti-paedophile who's at the heart of decision making?
Those are allegations. Once again, this is a news program. These people aren't here to defend themselves.
These are not allegations. These have been reported. I did not report. I'm being sued by a trans rights activist named David Paisley. The last trans rights activist who sued me was Stephanie Hayden. Stephanie Hayden is a criminal. David Paisley is a man who destroyed a gay magazine called Boys Magazine, destroyed the livelihood of its editor, David Bridle, and all of this is readily available online.
And in which case, if you are
understanding the subject,
if you're in active legal proceedings, Graham, I'm going to cut away for your own good. I'm going to cut away for your own good, just so that we don't get you into any further deeper legal trial. It's not amazing.
Everyone can see this.
Everyone will see this. Everyone will see this, Graham. And I think some people find it a tragedy that we've ended up here from such a comic genius, from such a brilliant mind. Let's bring in the voices in the studio as well. You've been listening into that. Grace and Peter. Peter, I'll come to you first because I know you've got some history with Graham as well. He's made accusations to you online. He was bringing up Stonewall then. Reminder to our viewers, you're an LGBT activist and campaigner. What do you make of all that?
Well, what Graham likes to do is highlight the bad actions of a handful of people who are not representative of the trans community or the wider LGBT community. That is very, very wrong. It's like those far-right extremists who highlight terrorism by Muslims to tar and demonize the whole Muslim community. That is totally and utterly wrong. We have to say that trans people deserve dignity and respect. Giving them dignity and respect doesn't take away the rights of anybody else. And this is a community where the hate crime figures have soared in recent years, fueled by toxic rhetoric from people like Graham and many others. And I just look at the kinds of responses that they generate. They generate against me. I'm not even trans, I'm just a trans ally. And if I make any statement in support of trans people, I get threats to kill me, rape me, and castrate me by people who support Graham and other trans critics. Now, I'm sure Graham would not agree with that, but he is fueling a toxic atmosphere. And I know from my trans friends, one of the reasons why I'm here tonight is because no trans person is willing to put themselves in the firing line and have threats to bomb their homes, to kill their children, to murder them and their partners. This is shocking, and I just wish we could have a quiet, considered, rational debate. We can disagree, but let's do so respectfully without demonizing other people, without making these inflammatory statements. And Graham must know, he was axed from Twitter because he made violent threats against other people. He was subjected to a police order over harassing people. He is not behaving in a way that is responsible and respectful.
If I could have got another word in edgeways, but there's a point at which sometimes, if I'd asked him another question, he would have just started listing more allegations there. But I wanted to speak to him, Grace, about exactly that. Do you not see the fanning of the flames to the wider community?
I think you handled that well. I question, to be honest, the decision to have him on at all, because this is a prime example of what people say when they say, I've been cancelled, what they mean when they say, I've been cancelled. The idea that because you have views that are so objectionable, because you debate in a way that is so just grating, quite frankly, and rude, insulting, talking over people, unable to have a civilised conversation, unable to just look at the facts to kind of take into account people's rightly very sincere feelings over this. And you then say, and a private institution has stopped playing my show. Therefore, that's an abuse of the right to free speech, which, of course, it isn't. The right to free speech is something that is guaranteed by the state, largely to protect against tyranny from the state. It's to prevent things like what we're seeing at the moment with protesters being put in jail for just the act of protesting. And then, because of that furore, he then gets more publicity on shows like this to air his utterly abhorrent views.
Yeah.
That is cancellation in a nutshell.
I mean, it's very interesting. See, I defend the right of free speech of people with whom I disagree. I've often defended Christian fundamentalists who've said horrible things about gay people, but I think they have a right to express that view, providing it's within the law. What's interesting about people who are trans critics is they accuse others of doing bad things to them, but they do exactly the same to others. So they're complaining about the very things that they do to other people.
And I would like to pick up, but we're going to cross back to Graham shortly, the point about having Graham on and platforming him. I see where you're coming from, Grace. But if we do believe in free speech and listening to the views we even find objectionable, I do think there is
I think this is my point, though, about the free speech debate, which is that free speech, again, it's part of the it's the framework of liberal democracy. And the idea is you have the right to freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and those things are guarantors against tyrannical rule, largely by the state. It doesn't mean that you are owed a platform. It doesn't mean that a private organisation has to give you a stage. It simply means that if the state were to put you in prison for saying something, that would be unconstitutional.
And most people in Britain could agree with that.
Actually, we've got illegal protests at the moment, but that's perhaps a story for another day.
It is for another day. Let's go back to Graham. He's been listening in. He's got to write a reply, Graham, and I believe that we can't just start listing people, court cases and everything else. But you've just listened to what Peter and Grace were saying in the studio. I want to give you a chance to respond.
Well, Peter defamed me several times in that speech. He said that I said violent threats to people. So once again, I'm going to have to be speaking to legal people about this. I named central figures in the trans movement who have never been called out by Peter Tatchell. Peter Tatchell, who wrote a letter supporting sex between children and adults in the
Graham,
garden.
that's not what we're talking about, Graham.
Or was it 1999? Peter, what was that letter again?
Graham.
Can you tell us about the Sambia tribe?
Graham.
Peter.
We wanted to talk to you about...
Don't lecture me when you are ignoring a man who
We're not ignoring anything, Graham. This isn't the conversation. We invited you on to talk about. We want to talk to you about.
You allowed those two people to defame me.
You
Can
don't.
I go back to the original question?
Can I ask Graham a question?
Do you disagree with?
Can we?
Graham, I want to ask you a question. I referred to a report that said that you had been suspended from Twitter because of violent threats. That report has been widely reported.
Where did that report arrive?
I've also referred to other reports.
Because I would sue them if they said that. And you also mentioned the person who I was visited by the police. That was Stephanie Hayden. I suggest everyone at home
We are
look
going
up
to end
Stephanie
this
Hayden.
debate here.
Thank you.
I don't know if I've learnt much, but it has been interesting to get those views, I suppose, this evening. It's just this,
I named
Speechless.
central figures in the trans movement who have never been called out by Peter Tatchell. Peter Tatchell, who wrote a letter supporting sex between children and adults in the garden.
Where the soil is sanctified by the blood of each true man, where they died satisfied, their enemies they would not from will you come?